Hello, yes, my name is Dan Staniaszek. I work at the Buildings Performance Institute Europe in Brussels, and I'm a senior expert here, and I'm delighted to be at your Serbia Green Building Expo today. I'm glad to see there's lots of manufacturers here, products and solutions really, because it's really about solutions that I think we need to focus on because we have big issues with buildings across Europe and in Serbia as well. There's a lot of energy wastage, and we need to find the solutions that are going to reduce that energy consumption. We need to act on all fronts. Yes, we need to build new buildings to very high standards, and the European legislation will require all buildings from 2020 onwards to be nearly zero energy buildings. But the real energy consumption is in the existing buildings. That's where most of the wastage is. So here we have two options. We could knock down the building and start again and build a new one in that place, or we can renovate the building stock. But in reality, as you say, there are very many nice buildings which we don't want to knock down. So it's about being very sensitive to those buildings and to renovate them. And there are very many solutions that we can do that, but we need to be very ambitious in terms of how much energy we look to save in those buildings. Well, we should certainly be much more conscious of the resources we're using. I think we've become very wasteful as a society, and that's across Europe, across the developed world. And yes, we've lost track of, we lost contact with some of the basic requirements, you know, water, keeping warm, etc. And whilst we're not saying back to basics in terms of let's live in caves or let's not heat our buildings, but it's about being much more conscious about the resources we're using, because energy is running out, water is becoming an issue, and with climate change these could become even more serious problems. So I think it's about the consciousness really, and that's probably the most important step. Then we can start thinking about doing things to improve our buildings and reduce the spend, as well as reducing the carbon dioxide emissions from buildings. Well, I think we say in England, singing from the same hymn sheet, so that means being on the same message. So if the architects are saying one thing but the contractors are saying something very different, then there is a mismatch and things don't get done properly. So I think if we can get the various stakeholders in the value chain, the contractors, the building owners of course, the financiers, the architects, the designers, to really recognise that we need to kind of get a holistic solution that really addresses the problem of the building and realises the opportunities, then yes, that's the ideal scenario. It'll be difficult and there'll be problems along the way, and of course, if someone is looking for a very particular architectural style, then that might have an impact on the building energy use. But I think we need to just grow the consciousness across the piece, really, that energy use is important, about saving energy is important. And actually we can, if we're thinking about, say, incorporating renewable technologies, then that might lead to new looks of buildings, new designs, a very modern looking building. So there are lots of ways of doing it, and every building is different, every building is unique, but I think it's about making sure that we think about the energy at the start, whether it's a new build or a renovation. Well, I think we need to get the right price signals in place, and if energy or water is free, then no one's going to save it. And if you can't control your costs, then you don't care. You open the windows, you leave the heating on, etc. So it's important that we send the right price signals and that people are conscious, made aware of the importance of energy. And yes, it does mean making sure that we don't subsidise energy, and that can be quite a very difficult message, very sensitive message. So it needs to be done sensitively, but with the right story behind the issue, because for me the important thing is not how much you're paying per unit of energy, it's about what the total bill is. So even if the unit price is going up, if you then take measures to reduce consumption in a building, whether it's a house or a factory or an office block, that's the important thing. You're reducing your overall energy bill. So maybe by looking at sort of making prices more realistic, then it'll raise people's consciousness and they'll start doing something about it. They'll invest in energy saving, and actually their total spend will go down, and that's the important thing. I'm glad you asked that, because it gives me an opportunity to mention the European directive. It's the Energy Efficiency Directive, which was just introduced in October 2012, last year, so very new. But that includes a requirement for all member states to develop energy efficiency renovation strategies for buildings. And I think this is really, really important, because we're talking about a long-term agenda where over, let's say, 20, 30, maybe even 40 years, we need to renovate the buildings to improve their energy performance. And it creates the framework for government and manufacturers and building owners and investors to sort of really look at the problem and say, how are we going to get from a position where we're doing very limited amounts of renovation with little energy savings to where we can perhaps modernise buildings, upgrade its performance, upgrade its facilities, but at the same time upgrade its energy performance. And in a strategic way, so that we scale things up, so that if we're doing 1,000 buildings in one go, it's cheaper than doing one building at a time. And so let's scale things up. Let's really get it going. Let's renew our building stock and reap the benefits, the jobs it will create, the health improvements, the reduced energy imports, and of course the carbon savings as well. So there's lots to be said as to lots of benefits to be arrived from renovating the building stock.